When I was 15 years old, I found out I was pregnant with twins. My boyfriend at the time was 21 and had nothing to do with me. When he knew I wasn't going to give them up for adoption or abortion, he walked away. My mom was disappointed, but she helped me throughout my entire pregnancy and my delivery. A few weeks before my due date, my boyfriend texted me saying he broke up with this girl and that he wanted to get together and he was going to try to become the best dad he can. After the twins were born, it was blissful for a few moments until my mother started becoming toxic. She would take them places without my knowledge, and I would wake up to an empty house not knowing where my kids were. She started overriding my decisions, and when I confronted her, she told me she knew better because she was an adult, and I was in no position to contradict her. After years of this happening, I finally had enough, and I managed to get enough money to afford a hotel for a couple of nights while I decided what to do. I asked my aunt to watch my kids for a few days so I can go out and find a job, and when I returned to the motel, they were gone. All of them. When I returned back to the hotel, my twins and my aunt are missing. No phone call, no message, no nothing. Coincidentally, my mom calls and says that my best friend told her that my twins were missing, even though I told no one. She was yelling at me on the phone saying she was so worried and it was obviously my fault because I was so young, and at that point I was really suspicious because I could hear my aunt in the background talking to my mom. So at that point I knew she took them to my mom's house. As soon as I hung up on the phone, I went to the police station to file a report. For a few days, the police went undercover to try to get evidence, and there was many pictures showing my mom taking my twins to their house. When we took her to court, she said that they ran away due to my abuse and she found them in the middle of the street, which was obviously a complete lie. My mom had paid my boyfriend to give her false information that I was hurting my kids. After a long and gruesome battle, I won the case and my mom can't see them until they're 18. Even though my boyfriend at the time had a major part in it, he only has visitation limitations, which is once every 6 weeks. This happened 3 years ago when I was 18. I am now married to the love of my life and the best father in the world.
Story time to when I was dating a pedophile. And no, I didn't know until 6 months into the relationship. So I met this guy on Tinder, and he was 10 years older than me, but honestly, I didn't mind that. He was kind of cute, and he was a total gentleman. But 5 months into the relationship, he started acting really weird. But before we get into anything, I used to sleep at his house every single day. And this dude did not have one friend. Total red flag. So sometimes I would just chill at his house while he went to work. And he always told me not to go outside without him. Like the dumb bitch I am, I just thought he was trying to protect me. So he lived by a gas station and a breakfast place, and when we went into either of those places, people would stare at us. Come back for part 2. Part 2 on how I was dating a pedophile. Now, I forgot to say this in the beginning, but I was 24 at the time. So like I said, anytime we went in the gas station or in the breakfast place, people would stare us down. And I honestly thought it was because of the age difference, because it was obvious. But no. About 4 months into the relationship, he started telling me he had to go to court every single week. He told me it was nothing important, but I was already starting to get suspicious because this guy's family didn't even talk to him. So one day while he was at work, I went through his stuff and I found all the paperwork about what he did. Now, I was shitting my pants because I didn't have a car, so I waited for him to get home. And I asked him about it, and he said it was a misunderstanding, that the person was lying, and that he only did some time. Come back for part 3. Part 3 on how I was dating a pedophile. So he told me he did some time, got out for good behavior, and that he's trying to start a new life and forget about all of that. And I believed him, but then that same night, he wanted to, and I told him I was not in the mood. And he got really mad, tried to force me, but then he said he was sorry. And guys, I called a cab and told him if he ever tried to contact me again, I would call the cops and let them know that he never told me he was a pedophile. But I still ended up telling the cops, and I never saw him again.
Story time about the psycho neighbor that stalked me. So, when I graduated college, I moved into a new apartment. When I first got there, I was moving my things in, and my neighbor introduced himself and helped me move a couple of things upstairs. After we had got done, he asked for my number, but I told him I wasn't really looking for a relationship. But he said, let's just swap numbers just in case, a fire happens. So I gave him my number and I really didn't think nothing of it. Maybe a week later, he starts knocking on my door and giving me gifts just about every day, like teddy bears and flowers. Then maybe about 2 weeks later, I told him to stop because I wasn't really interested in him. So the next day, I wake up to make coffee and take out trash. When I pass my living room, the teddy bear gift that my neighbor gave me makes a click noise. When I quickly rip the teddy bear open, it's a camera inside. Like for part 2 about the psycho neighbor that stalked me. So, like I said earlier, the teddy bear gift that my neighbor had gave me makes a clicking noise. When I quickly rip the teddy bear open, it's a camera inside. And I go into a panic mode. Out of nowhere, there's a knock on my door, and it's my neighbor. He says, "Good morning, it's me again. You left your trash too close to the curb, so I moved it for you." I realized that my door was still open, so I try to run over and lock the door, but he just opens it. I yell at him, telling him to get out. He closes the door behind him and says, "That's no way to talk to a neighbor." I start backing up. He looks over and sees that I ripped the teddy bear apart. I didn't know what else to do, so I just ran to my room. And he chases after me and pulls my hair. Like for part 3. Part 3 about the psycho neighbor that stalked me. So he comes in, I run into my room, and he chases after me. Before I could get up, he pulls onto my hair and starts dragging me towards the kitchen. I saw the coffee that I had made earlier, and I was able to pick it up and throw the hot coffee in his face. He starts screaming loud, and I took that chance to run into my room and lock the door. I immediately start calling the police, and from there, it sounded like he ran out of my apartment. When the cops came, they're doing an investigation, and all the gifts that he gave me all had cameras in them. And when I told them about my neighbor, they did some digging, and come to find out, that man wasn't even my neighbor. He didn't even live at the apartment complex.
Over 4 months ago, I gave birth to my 4th and last child. It was a high-risk pregnancy, and the birth was very difficult. My doctors advised me not to have any more kids, and I agreed. My husband had a vasectomy, and now he's recovering. My little sister's been trying to have a family for a while now, but she recently found out that she can't conceive. My family suggested surrogacy or adoption, but my sister said that she would have to think about it. She called me a few nights ago and told me that she's decided on surrogacy with her boyfriend. That's when she brought up the fact how I had done so well with all my pregnancies and how I must love being pregnant. I knew exactly where this was going and reminded her how my last pregnancy was, and yet she told me everything was fine now, so what's my issue? I told her just because I'm fine now doesn't mean that I'll be fine next time. That's when she straight up asked me if I'll be her surrogate or not, and I told her no, and that I didn't want to leave my kids without a mother or my husband a widow. She went ballistic on the phone and called me selfish and a bitch and wouldn't stop. The next morning my phone was blowing up with notifications and everyone, including our mother, was against me. So am I being selfish because I'm not putting my own health at risk to give her a baby? My sister made a Facebook post basically saying that I'm selfish because I have 4 kids, but I won't be her surrogate and help her have a baby. My mom and a small handful of people are extremely angry at me, calling me all sorts of names for being selfish. On the other hand, several others, including my dad and my brothers, are taking my side, which is why I made my own Facebook post. I explained my situation and how it would be a high-risk pregnancy and the complications I had with my last child. Several people tagged my sister in my post to tell her off, but she blocked everyone and then called and screamed at me for putting personal information on Facebook. Then my sister's boyfriend called me and apologized. He had no idea that she had asked me, and he even offered to find surrogacy with her, but she always complained that it was too much. My mom never commented or said anything on my post, but then I asked her to lunch and she agreed. When I arrived, she started telling me off for going on Facebook to complain. Apparently this is a family matter and should be talked about privately. I then asked her how my body was a family matter. All she said was, "I made you, so it's a family matter." This is when things got intense. I asked my mom what would happen to my kids if something happened to me, and all she said was, "They will live." I could not believe the stubbornness of this woman. I then went on to tell her that whether they lived or not, it was still going to break them. My oldest child would go back to her dad, and the younger 3 would stay with my husband. Separating them would break them even more. And once again, she said that they would live. Then she went on to tell me that I need to do the right thing for my family because it's not that big of a deal and I need to grow up and act like an adult. At this point, I was so upset that I got up, left, and cried the whole way home. Not long after, my dad showed up at my doorstep and asked if he could stay for a while. After lunch, my mom told him that I was still refusing to do a simple task for my sister, That's when he told her off for not thinking about all her kids instead of her golden child, and things could be worse this time for me. My mom told him that it's my fault for not looking after myself, and after this, my dad left her. My dad has been living with me since he left my mom, and the kids and my husband love having him around. I know he will eventually try talking to my mom again, but whether they get back together or not just depends. In all honesty, it seems like my mom doesn't care, and if they do divorce, I'll probably be the one to blame.
Story time about how I had to beat my grandma's ass. So to give you a quick little backstory about my grandma was not innocent. She used to run the streets back in her day. So I wasn't that close to my grandma, and neither was my mom, but my mom would still try to help her out from time to time and give her money. So one day, my dumb grandma and her dumb old friends decided to go rob a bunch of people. Now, of course, they old asses get caught, and my mother has to bail them out. So after my mom gets her from the jail, she's going on the whole time in the car like, you should have given me more money. So they're arguing and everything, and my mom's like, I don't understand why you're complaining. I always help you out when you ask me. My grandma feels like she shouldn't have to ask because she's her mother. So we're bringing my grandma back to her house, and as soon as we pull in the driveway, she gets out of the car and slams the door and goes inside. So as me and my mom are walking up the stairs to get inside, my grandma opens the door with a pistol. She's threatening to shoot her if she doesn't give her more money. Like for part 2. Story time about how I had to beat my own grandma's ass. So like I said in part 1, that old ass lady pulled out a pistol on my goddamn mama. Now, mind you, we are in the hood, so seeing pistols is not a big thing to most people in that neighborhood. Long story short, nobody called the cops, so we had to handle it ourselves. So I'm trying to calm my grandma down, and then she aims it at me. That's when my mom lost it. So she tries to grab the gun, and my grandma was not feeling that. So with my grandma's free hand, she swings on my mom, hitting her in the face. Now this was some ghetto ass shit. So my mom and grandma are on the ground fighting like some ghetto ass hood rats. And I didn't want to have to fight my grandma, but she started putting the gun to my mom's head. So I get on top of my grandma and I start whooping that ass. Because at this point, I was convinced she was actually going to shoot her. So I'm kicking her old ass in the back and dragging her off by her gray ass hair. As soon as I got them separated, I called the police, got her old ass locked up, and no, we did not bail her out this time.
Story time about how I was sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. So a little background information. This all happened last year. So originally I was working in a warehouse, but whenever COVID hit, lost my job, I had to get a new job. So I applied at Walmart in the electronics section because they paid more money, period. And on my second day, I finally went and started working in electronics. So they had asked some of the employees to show me around. So while this one employee was showing me around, he took me to the back where the photos were. Well, whenever I got back there, this employee named Terry said, "Oh, she's mine." I just laughed and brushed it off because I felt super uncomfortable and awkward. And he knew I was underage because my name tag was yellow. But even after that, he still kept coming up to me, calling me weird names, just being a total creep. Like, he would keep coming up to me and get super close to me to the point where I could literally feel him fucking breathing on my face. So of course I told my manager about it. They said he's done this before, so I was like, why the fuck is he still here? So they moved me to garden. And while I was working in the gardening section, I met this guy named Jordan. Like for a part 2. Part 2 of how I was sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. Something I forgot to mention in the first part, I reported Terry several times and they still did nothing about it. So like I said, then I met this kid Jordan, him and I started getting close, and work actually started to become fun. Well, finally, after a month, we decided that we were going to go out to lunch during work. So the day that we went out to lunch, he kept telling me that he needed to tell me something. But he was like beating around the bush the whole time. Like for some reason, he just couldn't get out what he wanted to tell me. But then he kept trying to change the subject like he wasn't the one who brought it up in the first place. I should have took that as a red flag before we went to lunch, but I didn't. So he keeps going on about it in the car, right? And then he's like, I'm not really 20, I'm 25 turning 26. So then for some reason after that, whenever he saw my mood change, this guy has the audacity to start touching my legs, fucking rubbing my inner thigh and shit. I kept telling him to stop. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? So then I told him I'm getting out of the car. And he says, I'm not gonna let you, like for part 3. Part 3 of how I got sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. So like I said, he wouldn't let me out of the car, but then we got back to work. And then he had the audacity to keep asking if I was okay when he literally just sexually harassed me in the car. So I went to the bathroom, literally had a whole fucking mental breakdown. I called my mom to come get me because I was not finna stay there. So the next time that I went back to work, I grabbed my stuff and I gave it to one of the workers to go and give to a manager and tell them that I was quitting. Well, one of the managers caught me walking out the back door and she was like, what's wrong? So I immediately broke down. I started telling her what was going on. And then a crowd of people came around us being nosy as fuck, listening to what I was saying. And she was like, you're not quitting. I'm going to take care of this. So she sent me home and she said that she would call me whenever it was taken care of. So 2 days goes past. I'm like, why the fuck hasn't she called? So then I call and I found out that she fired me. So I reported everything to Walmart ethic team and they just closed my case. They basically didn't do shit about it. Oh, and Jordan wasn't really a manager. He was a supervisor. Should I try to take this to court?
Be careful on who you decide to meet up with on a dating app because you might just end up on a date with a narcissist. When I was in Denver, I ended up matching with a really hot 39-year-old who also happened to be a lawyer. I recently called off an engagement, so casually dating other people was kinda in the books for me. Before meeting him, I made sure I took all the usual precautions. We made it very, very clear what our boundaries were and said that there was no expectations. So like either of us could leave after a drink and it would be totally fine. Also, we made sure to FaceTime and he seemed super sweet, totally normal. However, the second we sat down, it seemed like he was on drugs. He would literally talk a million miles an hour about himself and wouldn't let me get a breath in. And the stuff he was bringing up was just odd. Like he even included that he broke off an engagement too. Hold on to that thought. 2 drinks in, this man leans over and says, I've been diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenic disorder, but I didn't want to talk about it over text. Because I don't know a whole lot about those mental disorders, I felt a little uncomfy. I also didn't feel like that was a first date topic. Then he literally starts joking about murdering me and states that he would use my dead body for Face ID to text my friend that I'm safe so the timing is off for the investigation. Like for part 2. Part 2 of going on a date with a narcissist. So I start getting uncomfy and getting ready to leave. He offers to call a car and I say, oh no, it's fine, you got my drink, I'm just gonna go. And he gets confused and he's like, wait, what's going on here? Are we not going home together? I expressed that I was just tired and I wanted to get back to my hotel so that I could sleep and get on the road in the morning. He could not have been more offended by this and kept trying to make sexual comments to get me to come back to his place. Like, no, that's creeping me out more. So I get into my Uber and I make it home alone. And he texts me, tell Elise I said happy birthday tomorrow. That is my mom's name and it was her birthday tomorrow, but I didn't tell him any of this information over drinks. That's when I realized he had found my Facebook and then he called me. He proceeded to go off and lecture me because he couldn't comprehend why I wouldn't sleep with someone as great as he is. He expressed how much better he is than my ex-fiance, who I never brought up over dinner. This is when he let me know that he did his research on me before even meeting me. And I realized that a lot of the conversations that we had over drinks was him just verifying that I was the same person he found on Facebook. He still contacts me and I don't know what to do or say. Follow for more.
When I was 27, my boyfriend proposed to me. We both have stable jobs and decided to plan the wedding immediately. Around the same time, my brother proposed to his 24-year-old girlfriend and they started planning for the wedding as well. One day, my future sister-in-law called me to see if we can go over wedding planning. That's when she told me if I could get married in the afternoon and that she could get married an hour or two later and then we share the reception. She said it'd become a great way for us to become sisters and that this will mean the world to my brother. In reality, I know that they aren't financially well off and she wants the fancy wedding without the fancy wedding price tag. I didn't really know what to say, but I told her that's mine and my fiance's wedding. We planned it for us and we want it to be about us. She exploded in anger and said I wouldn't understand how hurtful it is to see the amazing wedding that I'm planning and know that she couldn't have something like that. I told her I waited to get married so that I could afford the wedding I wanted. And she said she wants to get married before she's old and dried up like some people. She called me heartless and a selfish bitch. I stormed off and my brother called me a few days later. He asked if I could please reconsider. I told him I didn't want to share my wedding day and I wasn't sure if I even wanted his fiancée there.